Do your essences and personality match? And how do you actually incorporate your style essences into how you dress? Today, I wanted to explore the connection between our personality, the way of dressing, and the different stages that we have in terms of developing our personal style in order to look and feel our best. This is a little bit more of a chatty video, but I wanted to explore this topic with you. So if this sounds interesting to you, then keep on watching. So the idea for this video actually came after some of my own reflections and some conversations I had with a couple of you. And it was all about how much of our personality is permanent, how much of it changes over time, and do we develop personality to complement or maybe counteract our essences, all of that good stuff. So today I wanted to share some reflections and observations that might help you to figure out your essences. If you have no idea what they are, you might see yourself in one of those stages. And if you're someone that already maybe knows your essence blend, you've had a professional analysis, or you're pretty sure what your essences are, this can help you confirm things and give you some ideas about how you can use them to get dressed. So first of all, as a quick reminder, I had my analysis with Andrea Plummer a couple of weeks ago. You can watch this video right here where I talked about exactly how my essence blend was determined. But as a summary, I have 30% high-spirited or gamine, and that is purely based on my personality, expression, voice. Then we have 30% ingenue, 20% classic, 15% romantic, and 5% dramatic, and all of those are visible within my physical features. So whether that is my face, my body, my coloring, and all of those are physically visible. So I mentioned in that video how I was actually very surprised that Andrea actually took into account the voice and expression and who am I as a person beyond just what you can see on my body and within my features. And I was very happy because as someone who dresses in much more of a high-spirited way, even today I'm wearing a t-shirt with the slogan and the sleeves. This is a high-spirited t-shirt, even though the way that I am styling it, let's say, is with a necklace and earrings, which are a lot more romantic and ingenue. So it's definitely a blend, but I like dressing as a high-spirited person. And so, of course, I set out to think about how do people develop the personality. Is it anyhow related to our experiences being perceived by other people, what we are told, the environments that we grow up in, and all of that, how it impacts maybe our personalities and our perceptions of ourselves and how this affects our personal styles? So the first stage, I always say, and I think this is a very natural stage, is when you become aware of your body and how you're being perceived, and sometimes it's not necessarily very conscious, you might rebel against that perception and you might want to go completely against it. So as an example for me, because my body has always been soft, even when I was at a much, much lower weight, when I was quite slim, I still had this feeling of fleshiness in my skin, in my arms, everywhere, right? And so that feminine perception, even when I was very young, I didn't necessarily like it, right? And so if you're someone that maybe is quite naturally feminine, you might want to completely rebel against that. And so the easiest way I think people do that is they start dressing completely the opposite way of what might be the recommendation for the essences. So for me, for example, that would be dressing in a very natural way. So the natural is flowy, is casual, it might be sporty. And so I decided to make this outfit just to show you that if I wanted to hide myself and kind of almost counteract the feminine of my essences, this is the best way to do that. And those outfits look extremely harmonious on people that have a high natural essence. They look amazing, they look stylish, they look nonchalant. On me, I personally think that looks a bit sloppy, not put together, and I'm not saying that this is sloppy, I'm saying that on me, because it's completely against my essences, I look a bit sloppy. Editing Millie here. I also wanted to show you two other outfits. This first one is this very cool sort of oversized t-shirt with clog-like shoes, and it is very relaxed, but I think it just looks completely wrong. And the other one, even though individually all of those pieces are pieces that I like and I wear, styled like this in a very flowy, natural way, a little bit like Phoebe Buffay from Friends, I just think it looks really off on me. It doesn't highlight my beauty, even though, let's say, on top, the colors are perfectly correct. So it's not even the color analysis. It's just the structure of the outfit and how it lays. It's not very flattering. That is the first stage, and it almost feels like a bad costume, I call this. So you might be the opposite, right? Like you might be someone that is naturally quite high in maybe natural and dramatic, so the more young essences. And so if you don't like that, if you don't want to be perceived in that way, you might go into completely the other side. You might wear those very flowy, ethereal pieces. And again, it's almost like hiding. On some people, those would look amazing. On you, they might feel like they're almost hiding who you are. They might feel disproportionate and not good, like a bad costume. And that is oftentimes, I think, a sign that you're not dressing in accordance with your essences, but almost from a place of wanting to hide and not wanting to be perceived in the way that naturally you would be if you dressed for the essences and the body that you have naturally. Now, you might be wondering, why am I saying, well, I'm not dressing in an ethereal way? Something that I learned from Andrea is that if you're someone that, for example, has ingenue and romantic, which are both feminine essences, even though I don't have ethereal, I can pull off some of the ethereal items. So even though that is not the recommendation, I can do that. And the same applies, for example, people that might be, let's say, natural and dramatic, they might be able to pull on some of the high-spirited pieces. So you can kind of do that if you have, let's say, a lot of yang or a lot of yin energy. So for me, an ethereal outfit won't look amazing, but it won't look nearly as bad as a natural outfit would. And so for me, ethereal never felt like a bad costume. It just didn't feel like me very much, but that's it. Like it didn't feel like it was achieving the effect of hiding my features. So that is the first phase, the bad costume. The next phase that I uncovered, I call it the good costume. And so this would be when you tap into one of your minor essences. So a minor essence might be something that you have 5-10% of. So it is still present somewhere, maybe within your facial features, maybe it's on your body. It is something that you have just a tiny bit of. And so the typical recommendation is almost like a shoelace, right? Like it's a flavor. It might be that you have a small accessory that's within that essence, or it might be kind of an element, right? And so for me, that dramatic is only 5% of my mix. And I call it a good costume when you take that minor essence and you amplify it. And so for me, that can mean an outfit that is purely dramatic, which is going to feel very out of place, but it can help me temporarily almost create that effect that I'm searching for. Or it might be a little bit more subdued. So maybe I have a dramatic blazer, but then paired with romantic ingenue and classic items. So it doesn't feel completely off base, but it's definitely stronger than naturally I would have gone for. So the minor essence, I feel like if you have situations where you want to reach for a certain feeling, you want to create a certain perception, and maybe you know that the way that you normally dress, it doesn't achieve that effect, this is where you probably naturally tap into that minor essence. So for me, for example, if I want to be taken seriously, if I'm going to a job interview, I'm wearing a blazer, I'm wearing something a bit more serious, more dramatic, more strong and oversized. Also, if I want to be kind of left alone, I would oftentimes wear a lot of black head to toe. And so that outfit, even though it might look a bit more sensual to other people, to me it feels very strong, almost like protective, in the sense that I don't want to be bothered and I want to just be left alone, right? And so for me, reaching into that dramatic essence is like a good costume. I don't use it every day because it doesn't feel good, but it is something that I can tap into. And just for fun, because those pants and this tank top I actually wore backwards because I don't really own any very plain black items. This is the version that is the very dramatic one. And this is actually what the outfit looks like. And you can see that it's exactly the same shapes, exactly the same color, but because one has the rhinestones and the embellishments, it looks definitely a lot more of that high-spirited, maybe even ingenue, versus the one that is pure black, pure dramatic. So I can definitely tap into different essences compared on how I choose to wear it. So for you, you might have, let's say, natural and dramatic and classic essences, but then maybe you have a 5% of romantic. So it's a very small sort of that yin energy. But then maybe some days or specific occasions, events, you want to feel a bit more sensual and feminine. And so rather than maybe just doing red lipstick, which is maybe the right proportion of romantic, you might go for a romantic blouse, or you might go for a romantic skirt, or you might wear red head to toe and things like that. So it might still be the natural and dramatic cuts, but the color is going to be a lot more romantic. And so it's almost like tapping into that good costume to achieve a desired effect. The next stage is the one that got me initially thinking about this topic, and that is around how much of our personality is true and how much it is developed in response to our upbringing, our environment, and just life events. So just to give you an example, I think as a kid, I was naturally quite drawn to feminine pieces, just dresses and florals and light colors and all of that. And because I have those essences, I feel like on me they look very harmonious. Now, I grew up in an environment where I was competing in mathematics, and maybe early on there was quite a good proportion of girls and boys. But as we grew older, the proportion of women actually went smaller and smaller and smaller, to a point where there were many events where I was the only girl, or maybe one of very, very few. And so that was something that was quite uncomfortable. And so I realized that the way that I look, however I dress, I look a bit more innocent, very kind and nice and approachable and all of that good stuff, which is great, but it doesn't position you as a strong competitor. And sometimes people can maybe walk all over you and dismiss you and not take you seriously. And when I was going to competitions, and maybe sometimes I'll have to prove something or go against a lecture and kind of try and prove my point, it felt very difficult to do that if I fully dressed in this more feminine way. And I think that this is where I started to develop parts of my personality that were probably always there, but they were a lot more subdued. And so, for example, more assertive part of myself and the part that was more creative. Both of those parts actually developed over the past 10 years to a point that I'm actually stepping into that person and who I am. But I almost feel like both of those parts, if I was in an environment that maybe was very feminine and maybe, I don't know, flower arrangement and there is no competitive spirit or anything like that, I'll have developed a slightly different personality, because how I look and how I dressed wouldn't have been perceived as weakness, right? And so I wouldn't have had to develop maybe some of those traits that I had, but were lying a bit more dormant. And so I have a couple of friends that actually have quite dramatic features, and so they know that they're perceived as quite strong, quite confident, sometimes a bit too brash. And they don't want to be perceived in that way, because they're like, well, I'm a really nice person, but how I look, it doesn't make sense, right? And so they know if they dress in florals and stuff like that, it doesn't look harmonious. So they still want to look good. And so they dress in, let's say, a dramatic line. Maybe they wear bold accessories or a suit or something like that. But they started to develop their personality to almost be kinder, softer, but more gentle, to a point where people are a bit surprised. And if they reach, let's say, like myself, their 30s, maybe 40s, and they're like, actually, I want to start incorporating a bit of that into how I dress. And so they might wear a suit, but with a softer, more romantic blouse or anything like that, just to show that, yes, they look dramatic, but their personality is maybe more romantic or ingenue or something like more on the yin side, right? And this is why I wanted to ask your opinions. Is our personality something that we fully innately have? Is it something that we develop in response to our environment? Is it a mix of both? Because I know for myself that I was always creative, even as a kid. And I was always confident, I think, as a kid. I've done things that I wouldn't have done if I wasn't a relatively confident child, but I lost a lot of that confidence. And I feel like in the past 10 years in maths and then engineering, I've had to learn to develop those qualities and then try and show a little bit of that in how I dress. I wouldn't wear, for example, a fully high-spirited outfit, because I might feel like that is also not 100% me, but I would incorporate high-spirited elements, that gaminish sort of element, to show that, hey, I might look very calm and feminine and all of that, but actually I'm quite high energy, I'm creative, and I want to show that to other people. This is where I call this phase the looks as a communication tool of who you are. And so it might be that you start to showcase aspects of your personality that you have actually developed. And then the final stage, and this is where I think is the end of that evolution process, is where you fully embrace your natural qualities, kind of how you look, your facial traits, your body, how you come across. You fully embrace that to a point where you don't care at all about perception. And I haven't reached that stage, but I'm imagining that for me, what that would mean would be I can wear quite a classic feminine dress, my red lipstick, my heels. So basically dressing for romantic, ingenue, and classic, fully dressing in that way. And then feeling very confident and comfortable going into a board meeting or going on a date or going to do my groceries, like any sort of situation. So basically not caring that my look says feminine, refined, whatever, and that my look doesn't communicate about my personality. But I'm not yet at that phase where I feel comfortable. And so that's why I feel like if you've watched any of my previous videos about kibi and words and things like that, I've had sometimes bad associations with the word feminine and sensual and all of that, because I think I'm naturally a little bit like that. And so I hadn't fully embraced that. And maybe there's going to be a point in time where I will fully embrace that, and perhaps this will show more in my style, and I wouldn't feel the need to say I'm a creative person with my clothes, because I just wouldn't care. I'll be like, I know that I'm a creative person. I don't need my clothes to communicate that, because I have it deep inside, and I'm okay dressing in a way that maybe fully flatters my body, but I'm not there yet. And if you're someone that maybe has reached that phase where you almost don't need to use clothes, I'm not saying you don't use it, but you don't need to use clothes as a communication tool, and you fully embraced who you are, your personality, your traits, and you're fully fine dressing in accordance with your features to look in the best possible way, I'd love to know if you have any advice for myself or anyone like this, because I think that it's almost like a stage where you've reached a stage of acceptance, and I'm just not there yet. So I'll be very honest, like I can't tell you how to do that, because I am still in that journey. I've definitely found myself leaning a little bit more, I think definitely into ingenue and kind of that more girlish essence. Romantic and that more feminine side, more sensual side is still something that I am struggling a little bit with. Even in my previous video on essences, people would say, oh, that thing looks really good on you. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't fully feel 100% right, because it doesn't communicate certain things about myself and my personality. And I've not arrived at that stage where I'm okay with that. So yeah, those were my reflections around the different stages of incorporating your essences into your look. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm really curious. This is a little bit more of a discussion rather than me guiding you on a specific thing. But yeah, I would love to know your thoughts.